The man I married had not saved me from my parents' killer. He had married me to keep her safe. I learned the truth on our second anniversary, outside the half-open door of Graham Vale's painting studio. I had brought takeout from the Thai place where he proposed. The paper bag was warm against my wrist, and the key to the studio was still sticking in the lock when I heard a woman's voice inside. The cold case detective called me again. Sloane Cross, my oldest friend, my childhood rival. The pianist who had taken every booking I lost after a man with a framing hammer destroyed both my hands. "Then stop answering unknown numbers," Graham said. She asked about the brake line. The bag slipped an inch in my grip. 4 years earlier, my parents' car had gone through a barrier north of the city and landed upside down in the Hudson. The first report called it brake failure. The second called the damage deliberate. After 18 months without an arrest, the case had gone cold. 3 weeks after their funeral, a masked man broke into my apartment. He took my father's laptop, pinned my wrists to the hardwood, and swung a hammer until I could no longer feel my fingers. Graham found me. Graham called 911. Graham sat beside my hospital bed and promised he would spend the rest of his life finding whoever had done it. Inside the studio, he lowered his voice. "They don't have Henry's drive. They don't have the original files. All they have is a theory. Mara remembers more than she says. Mara remembers what I helped her remember." My damaged right thumb began to jerk. It did that when I was cold or frightened. Sloane gave a brittle laugh. "You sound very sure for a man who hired Wade Danner." "I hired him to get the drive." "You paid him after he broke her hands." There was a pause. I opened the voice recorder on my phone and pressed the red button. Graham spoke again. "Because if Danner talked, all 3 of us went down. I cleaned up your mess, Sloane. I gave you an alibi. I married Mara so I would know if she remembered seeing you near that garage. What else do you want from me? You know what I want." The sound that followed was quiet, intimate, and unmistakable. A kiss. My husband had once spent $40,000 flying a hand specialist from Zurich to New York. He rubbed vitamin oil into my scars every night. When phantom pain woke me, he held my wrists and counted my breaths. I had mistaken surveillance for devotion. I had mistaken guilt for love. The studio door moved. I stepped behind a stack of shipping crates just before Graham came out. He wore the charcoal sweater I had given him that morning. Sloane followed, fastening the top button of her blouse. "I'll take care of the detective," he told her. Sloane touched the wedding ring on his hand. "And your wife?" Graham did not hesitate. "I always do." They left through the freight elevator. I stayed behind the crates until the Thai food went cold, and the recording timer passed 9 minutes. Then I stood, wiped my face, and walked into my husband's studio. For 4 years, Graham had known exactly who murdered my parents. By sunrise, I intended to know exactly what he had hidden. Graham painted wealthy people for a living. Senators, actors, founders who wanted oil and linen to make them look less temporary. His Manhattan studio was 4,000 square feet of white walls and north-facing windows. I had been there hundreds of times, but one section never made sense. The supply room was narrower than the exterior wall. At 2 in the morning, I rolled a rack of blank canvases aside and found a recessed steel latch beneath a strip of molding. The hidden door opened without a sound. There were 31 portraits of Sloane inside. Sloane, laughing in a hotel robe. Sloane asleep beneath gray sheets. Sloane at 22, seated at my parents' Steinway with one bare foot on the pedal. Studies of her mouth, her shoulder, her hands. Graham had painted my official portrait twice. Both times, he left my hands outside the frame. On a shelf beneath the paintings sat a Cartier watch, ticket stubs from Paris and Vienna, and the green silk scarf Sloane wore at my parents' funeral. Beside them was a silver solid-state drive with a strip of faded blue painter's tape, HE Archive. My father labeled every backup that way. The masked man had taken his laptop from my apartment, but he had kept demanding the little silver box. I told him I had never seen it. Apparently Graham had. I did not plug it in. I photographed it where it lay, wrapped it in a clean cotton handkerchief, and put it in my purse. Then I photographed every wall. On my way out, I stopped in front of the largest portrait. Sloane wore a red concert gown, her hands resting lightly in her lap. The paint was dated 3 days after my attack. Graham had been sleeping in a chair beside my hospital bed that week. He must have left me after midnight, washed the smell of antiseptic from his clothes, and come here to paint the woman who had ordered my ruin. I called Naomi Ruiz from the sidewalk. Naomi had handled my parents' estate and advised the Ellison Arts Trust. She answered on the 4th ring with the calm fury of someone awakened by a client who had been specifically told not to create emergencies. "Mara, it's 2:17. I found my father's missing drive." Silence replaced the irritation. "Where?" "In Graham's studio. With 31 paintings of Sloane Cross. Do not open it. Do not send me the recording. Do not confront either of them. Get in a cab and come to my building. The night concierge knows you." "Naomi, are you in immediate danger?" I looked back at the studio windows. "I don't know." "Then assume the answer is yes." 40 minutes later, Naomi placed the drive in an evidence envelope, wrote the time across the seal, and locked it in her office safe. She listened to my story without interrupting. She did not listen to the audio. "That recording may be useful as a lead," she said. "It may also create legal problems if you distribute it. We start with the physical item and the cold case unit." "Start?" "You found property taken during a violent burglary in the private room of a man who just admitted knowing the burglar. That is a start. It is not a conviction." I hated her for the sentence because it was true. At 6, Naomi called Detective June Harris, the investigator who had contacted Sloane. At 7, the 3 of us met in a windowless room at police headquarters. Harris was a compact woman with silver threaded through her braids. She asked me to tell the story twice. The second time, she stopped me whenever I mixed what I knew with what I suspected. What I knew? Graham had named Wade Danner. Graham had my father's missing drive. Graham and Sloane had lied to me for 4 years. What I suspected. Everything else. Harris accepted the sealed envelope and gave Naomi a receipt. "A lab will make a forensic image before anyone examines the contents," she said. "If your father encrypted it, we may need your help later. We also need to learn how Graham got it and why he kept it. Until then, act normal." Normal means going home to him. Her eyes met mine. "Can you do that safely?" I thought about Graham counting my breaths in the dark, Graham cutting my food after surgery, Graham kissing each damaged knuckle as if reverence could erase responsibility. "For one day," I said, "I was wrong." Sloane was waiting in my living room when I got home. She stood beside the baby grand Graham bought after my last surgery, although I had never managed to play more than a scale on it. Her camel coat was draped across my sofa. She wore cream wool and no wedding ring. "You look terrible," she said. "Happy anniversary to me." Her smile thinned. "Graham said you had a migraine and canceled dinner." I set my purse on the console. The drive was no longer inside it, but Sloane watched the bag anyway. "Did he send you to check?" I asked. "I came as a friend." "You've always been ambitious, Sloane. I didn't realize you were that ambitious." She walked to the piano and pressed middle C. "You got the family, the money, the teachers, the reviews. I had to be ambitious. You had my parents' scholarship. Charity with their name printed on it." She pressed the key again. The note sounded like a warning bell. "Your father enjoyed making mine beg," she said. "Then he called the police when the books didn't balance." Daniel Cross was marched out of that foundation in handcuffs while Henry Ellison gave interviews about integrity. Her father had diverted almost $2 million from youth music programs. He died by suicide before trial. I had mourned him with her. I had defended her when donors whispered that she must have known. "My father didn't steal the money," I said. "No. He only made sure everyone knew who did." She picked up a crystal tumbler from the bar cart. "What are you looking for?" I asked. "Nothing." "Then leave." I moved toward the apartment panel beside the entry and pressed the security button Naomi had told me to use. My body blocked Sloane's view while a blue icon lit beneath my palm. Then she dropped the glass. It struck the edge of the marble table and shattered. Before I could move, she dragged her palm across a broken rim. Blood ran over her wrist. She screamed. The front door opened almost at once. Graham rushed in, as if he had been waiting down the hall. Sloane stumbled into him. She attacked me. He wrapped his scarf around her hand and looked at me. Not confused, not shocked, accusing. What did you do? I held up my phone. The blue security light reflected in its black screen. She cut herself. The camera recorded it. Sloane stopped crying. For 1 second, the three of us stood in the quiet apartment, listening to blood drip onto my white rug. Graham recovered first. She panicked, he said. Whatever happened, we need to get her to the emergency room. Whatever happened? Mara, this isn't the time. He tightened the scarf around Sloane's palm. If a tendon is damaged, she may lose movement. A pianist's hands are her life. I stared at him. My scars ran from the base of each thumb, across both palms. Graham had traced them so many times that I used to believe he knew their shape by heart. Then what were mine? I asked. He opened his mouth. No answer came. Sloane pressed her uninjured hand to his chest. Please, Graham, it hurts. He took her toward the door. I spoke before they reached it. My father kept backups. Graham stopped. It was a mistake. Detective Harris had told me to act normal, and I had just placed a match beside gasoline. But I needed to see which one of them would burn first. Sloane turned slowly. What does that mean? It means you should have been more careful. Graham's face became perfectly still. The tenderness disappeared so completely that I wondered how I had ever believed in it. You're upset, he said. We'll talk when I get back. No, we won't. I lifted my left hand and removed my wedding ring. It caught for a moment on the thick scar over my knuckle. Then it came free. I set it on the piano. Graham watched me do it, but Sloane watched my purse. That was when I knew she had come for the drive. I left the apartment with 2 suitcases before Graham returned. Naomi put me in a furnished rental in Brooklyn under her assistant's name. The building had a doorman, cameras, and windows that faced a brick wall. For the first 3 nights, I slept with the lights on. Graham called 76 times. His messages moved through disbelief, tenderness, anger, and finally strategy. Mara, you misunderstood what you heard. I kept things from you because the truth would have destroyed you. Sloane is unstable. I have been managing her for years. Come home before you make this public and damage your parents' legacy. The last message proved he still did not understand me. He thought the Ellison name was the chain around my neck. It had been. Once. My parents were generous, demanding, and incapable of entering a room quietly. They expected excellence because excellence had always opened doors for them. I spent my childhood practicing until my wrists ached, terrified that love might be another scholarship I had to renew each year. After the attack, Graham asked nothing from me. That felt like mercy. It was useful to him when I stopped asking things of myself. 9 days after I left, Detective Harris and a digital examiner met Naomi and me at headquarters. The examiner had copied the drive without changing the original. After a judge authorized the search, I supplied a long passphrase my father had made me memorize for emergencies. It opened a document vault containing foundation audits, donor records, and scans of correspondence he had assembled before his death. Daniel Cross's fraud was larger than the public ever knew. Money had moved through fake after-school programs into accounts controlled by Sloane's manager. Some of it paid for her first European tour. There were also threats. One email from Sloane told my father, "You took everything from us. I will take the one thing you cannot replace." Motive, Harris said, not proof of murder. Then she played an audio file. It was 38 seconds of Chopin, recorded on a phone. Sloane had given the original detectives the file to support Graham's statement that she sent it from her apartment while they were on a video call. The embedded timestamp supposedly placed her miles from the garage when my parents' brake line was cut. I listened once, then again. At 16 seconds, the pianist rushed the left-hand turn into the reprise. At 29, she clipped a B-flat and covered it by leaning too hard into the next chord. My throat closed. "That isn't Sloane," I said. Harris leaned forward. "How can you tell?" "Because it's me." The examiner glanced at her screen. The file says it was created on Sloane Cross's phone. Then the file is lying. I pointed toward the speaker. I always rushed that turn when I was nervous. My teacher used to stop me there. And the B-flat, I missed it during a rehearsal for the Liszt Society recital. Could another pianist make the same mistake? Yes. But listen after it. She replayed the passage. Beneath the chord was a small wooden squeak. My father's studio bench, I said. The left hinge complained when the room was humid. He refused to replace it because it belonged to my grandmother. The examiner searched the drive and found a folder of my old rehearsal recordings. 11 minutes later, she located the full session. The same rushed turn, the same missed B-flat, the same squeak. At 42 seconds, beyond the excerpt Sloane had submitted, my father said, again from measure 60 bug, let the phrase breathe. No one else had called me bug. Harris did not smile. The lab will compare the files properly. If this is the source, Sloane fabricated evidence and Graham backed it with a false statement. For the first time since I entered the studio, something inside me loosened. My father had taught me that piece. 4 years after his death, one impatient phrase had answered him. What happens now? I asked. Now we go back through everything. Harris closed her notebook. And you stop baiting suspects in your living room. Naomi looked at me over her glasses. She told you about that? The security company did. We had them preserve the footage. It worked, I said. You got lucky, Harris replied. Those are not the same thing. She was right. Luck had kept me alive once. I needed more than luck to finish this. The first time I met Caleb Ross, I threw a metronome at him. Not a real one, a foam model from the hand therapy clinic. He caught it against his chest and said, "Good velocity. You're in my chair." Caleb stood. He was tall, rumpled, and carrying a stack of orchestral scores held together by a red shoelace. He conducted the Harbor Chamber Orchestra and had come to ask the clinic director about musicians recovering from injuries. He knew who I was. Everyone in that building did. He was simply the first person who did not lower his voice when he said my name. Mara Ellison, he said. You premiered a Field in Winter at 19 and disappeared at 28. I was going to say you took the final variation too fast. I almost laughed. It hurt in an unfamiliar place. Caleb was developing a concert around music changed by injury, pieces written for one hand, altered instruments, composers who built new technique around physical limits. He asked if I had ever considered arranging one of my father's unfinished compositions. I can't play it, I said. I asked if you could arrange it. That annoyed me enough to think about the question. My hands had improved after 2 reconstructive surgeries, but improvement was a cruel word. I could button a shirt. I could hold a glass without watching my grip. On a good day, I could play scales slowly for 15 minutes before my right hand cramped. I could not be the pianist I had been. For years, that sentence ended every thought. Caleb put his card beside the foam metronome. The rehearsal room is free Thursday mornings. No audience, no miracle expected. He left before I could refuse. I went the following Thursday because I was furious at him. That was the reason I gave myself. Over the next 6 months, the cold case moved in increments too small for headlines. The audio files went to a lab. Detectives pulled the physical evidence from my apartment attack and submitted prints again. Naomi filed for divorce and obtained temporary orders keeping Graham away from me and from the Ellison Arts Trust records. I spent Thursday mornings with my father's score. His right-hand passages were impossible for me, so I moved the melody between my stronger fingers. I gave the orchestra notes I could no longer hold. I turned one cadenza into a conversation between piano and cello. Caleb did not praise every page. He hated my ending and said so. It sounds like you're apologizing for surviving the piece, he told me. You conduct with your entire face. I don't criticize you. You do, constantly. He made bad coffee. He lost pencils in his hair. When he concentrated, he hummed half a step below the music, which should have made me despise him. Instead, I began waiting for Thursdays. One morning, Detective Harris called during rehearsal. An old partial palm print from the underside of my broken window had been reprocessed. It matched a man arrested in Nevada 8 months after my attack, Wade Danner. He was serving time for armed robbery under a different name. He wants a lawyer and a deal, Harris said. He also recognized Graham from a photo. I sat at the piano with my phone against my ear. My fingers rested on a chord I had not yet played. Did he say who told him to break my hands? Not without an agreement. But he gave us the name of the company that paid him. It connects to a checking account Graham closed after your wedding. Across the room, Caleb lowered his baton. He could not hear Harris, but he saw my face. Mara, Harris said, we're getting closer. My thumb began to shake. This time, I put it on the key anyway. The chord came out uneven. I played it again. Sloane fired her manager, canceled 2 concerts, and told a magazine she was taking time away for exhaustion. Graham did the opposite. He announced the largest exhibition of his career. The show, titled Survivors, would open at the Ellison Arts Trust Gala in September. Its centerpiece was a portrait of me painted after my attack. The canvas showed my face turned toward a window, my hands hidden beneath a blanket. He used a photograph taken while I was asleep in the hospital. He wants to own the story before it turns on him, Naomi said. We were in her office with Detective Harris and an assistant district attorney named Priya Shah. On the table lay a transcript of Wade Danner's first interview. Danner admitted Graham paid him to steal my father's silver drive. He claimed Sloane added the instruction about my hands. He had found the drive taped beneath the piano bench after I lost consciousness and delivered it to Graham the following morning. According to Danner, Graham had asked whether he opened it. When Danner said no, Graham called it insurance and locked it away. The lab later confirmed that its encryption had never been defeated. Graham had kept evidence he could not read because it gave him leverage over Sloane. Graham had sent half the money through a shell design company and handed over the rest in cash. The account records supported part of Danner's story. The fake Chopin recording supported another part. It was still not enough to prove who sabotaged my parents' car. Priya slid a legal pad toward me. We want you to make a controlled call to Sloane. My mouth went dry. You want me to get her to confess? I want you to tell her Graham is considering cooperation and let her react. Do not feed her facts. Do not improvise threats. If she hangs up, she hangs up. Naomi frowned. And if Graham is with her? Then we end the call. I thought of Sloane pressing middle C in my living room. You got the family, the money, the teachers, the reviews. She did not believe she was a villain. She believed she had corrected an imbalance. That belief was the door. The call took place the following afternoon in a police interview room. Harris sat across from me wearing headphones. Priya watched through the glass. Sloane answered after one ring. Where is the drive? She asked. No hello, with people who can open it. Her breathing changed. Graham said you didn't have it. Graham is talking to a lawyer about a deal. He would never. He married me. I let the words sit between us. He married you because you were fragile and grateful, Sloane said. You needed someone to make decisions. Did my parents need you to make their last decision? Harris raised one finger. Wait. Sloane gave a soft, disbelieving laugh. Your father had choices. He could have handled the money privately. He could have let my father repay it. Instead, he destroyed my family and went home to his perfect daughter. So you cut his brake line. I made him afraid for once. He died. That road was wet. I didn't make him speed. The room seemed to tilt. Harris wrote on her pad, "Keep her talking." And my mother? I asked. She chose to get in the car. I pressed my fingernails into my palm until scar tissue blanched. What did I choose? Sloane was quiet. The drive was in your apartment, she said at last. Danner was supposed to find it. He broke 23 bones in my hands. Graham paid for your surgeons. The answer was so monstrous in its simplicity that my anger went still. You think that makes you even? Nothing makes us even. You still have the name. You still have the trust. You even took Graham when he loved me first. Then why did he marry me? To keep you close. To keep you calm. To give you a life after we took the other one. We. Harris underlined the word twice. I heard a door open on Sloane's end. Graham said her name. Sloane hung up. For several seconds, no one in the room moved. Then Harris removed her headphones. "You did well." I looked down at my hands. Half-moon marks dented the scars. She said my mother chose to get in the car. Naomi came through the door, but I stood before she could touch me. I did not want comfort yet. I wanted consequences. Graham was waiting outside the rehearsal hall 2 nights later. The temporary civil order in our divorce gave me sole use of the apartment and limited Graham to contact through our lawyers. By approaching me in person, he was already risking contempt. The Harbor Chamber schedule had been circulated to the trust board before Graham was suspended. He had gone through old Foundation email until he found me. He looked thinner. His beard had grown in gray along the jaw, and his famous hands were shoved into the pockets of an old peacoat. For one dangerous second, I remembered those hands washing blood from my hair in the hospital. Then I remembered who had put the blood there. "You need to leave," I said. "I need 10 minutes. Caleb came through the doors behind me, carrying a music stand. He looked from Graham to me. "Do you want me to call security?" "Yes," I said. Graham flinched. Perhaps he expected me to protect him from embarrassment. Old habits were the last lies to die. "Mara, please. I never wanted Danner to hurt you. You paid him to recover evidence that would have put Sloane in prison. Evidence that would have put the woman who murdered my parents in prison." I thought I could contain it. His voice cracked. Sloane was sick with grief after her father died. She made one terrible decision. Then, every choice I made was about keeping the next person alive. I laughed once. "Is that what you call my hands?" He took a step toward me. Caleb moved between us, but I touched his sleeve. "No. Let him answer." Graham stared at my fingers on another man's coat. "When I found you that night," he said, "I understood what I had done. I called the ambulance. I stayed through every surgery. I loved you. You didn't find me. You came to check Danner's work." "That isn't true." "Then how did you get there before the neighbor who called in the broken window?" His silence answered. He had always told me instinct brought him to my apartment. In reality, a hired man had missed a check-in. "I married you because I couldn't leave you alone with what we'd done," he said. He still could not apologize without turning his guilt into a claim on me. "You did leave me alone," I said. "You just stayed in the room while you did it." The building security guard appeared at the end of the hall. Graham's face changed when he saw him. "Sloane recorded that call," he said quickly. "She'll claim you manipulated her. She'll drag your parents through court. She'll tell the press your father drove Daniel to suicide. I know. I can stop her. You had 4 years. What do you want from me?" It was the same question he had asked Sloane in the studio. I thought I wanted him frightened, ruined, on his knees. What I wanted was simpler. "Nothing," I said. "That is the part you can't survive." The guard escorted him out. Caleb waited until the doors closed. "Are you all right?" "No." "Do you want me to say something encouraging and probably stupid?" "Not especially." "Good." I had nothing. He sat on the floor beside the music stand. After a moment, I sat too. He did not touch me until I leaned my shoulder against his. By August, the district attorney had presented evidence to a grand jury. No one told me what happened in that room. They only warned me not to discuss the case and not to expect a schedule that cared about my need for an ending. The Ellison Arts Trust moved faster. Its independent audit confirmed that money stolen by Daniel Cross had financed Sloane's early career. The board suspended her September appointment as artistic director and canceled Graham's exhibition. Graham sued, accusing the trust of violating his contract, and me of weaponizing a family institution during a divorce. His portrait of me remained on the gala program while lawyers argued over ownership. I asked the board to leave it there. "Absolutely not," Naomi said. "I want people to see what he sold them. You are not required to turn your trauma into an educational installation." "I'm not. I'm turning his installation into evidence of his character." She rubbed the bridge of her nose. "I miss the client who followed instructions. You never had that client." The gala would also premiere my arrangement of my father's unfinished concerto. Harbor Chamber had been booked months before the audit, but I had never agreed to perform the piano part in public. Caleb agreed for me. I found out when a revised program arrived in my email. You told them I would play? I asked him in the empty hall. He set down his baton. I told them you could. That wasn't your decision. I know what you sound like in rehearsal. You know what I sound like on a good Thursday with no audience and ice waiting in the freezer. You do not know what these hands will do under stage lights. He started to answer, then stopped. That saved him. You're right, he said. I confused believing in you with having permission. He took out his phone, called the board chair, and withdrew my name while I stood there. No speech. No request that I forgive him for wanting the best. When he hung up, he handed me the printed score. The orchestra plays it either way, he said. You decide who sits at the piano. For 3 days, I decided no. Then Detective Harris called. The grand jury had returned sealed indictments. She could not give me details, but she asked whether Graham and Sloane were still expected at the gala. Graham planned to attend to protest the canceled exhibition. Sloane had told the board she would come with counsel and demand a public correction. They both believed a room full of donors would protect them. I looked at the portrait on the program. My sleeping face, my invisible hands. They'll be there, I told Harris. Harris warned me that officers might move during or immediately after the program. The board, chair, and venue security knew to expect a law enforcement operation. Caleb was entitled to know there could be a disruption, even if I could not tell him why. That evening, I called Caleb. Put my name back. He was silent for a beat. Are you sure? No. And there is something else. Police may interrupt the program. I should have told you before I asked for the piano back. I'm sorry. There was a longer silence. I'm glad you told me, he said. I'm also annoyed. You can be both. All right. That's all you have to say about the performance? You told me it was your decision. I'm trying this new thing where I listen. I smiled despite myself. Caleb? Yes? Take the ending slower. That, he said, is a terrible artistic choice. Do it anyway. Yes, ma'am. On gala night, Graham's portrait hung alone in the center of the Ellison Arts Trust lobby. The placard still read Survivor. I asked the staff to add one line beneath it, painted without the subject's knowledge from a photograph taken while she was sedated. People stopped, read it, looked again. Graham arrived at 7 in a black tuxedo, and the expression of a man entering his own trial by choice. Sloane came 10 minutes later with 2 attorneys. A pale scar crossed the hand she had cut in my apartment. She wore red. The same shade as the dress in Graham's hidden portrait room. I watched from behind the stage curtain. My hands were taped beneath the wrists. My right thumb shook against my skirt. Caleb held out his palm. Cold? He asked, terrified. That too. He did not tell me I would be brilliant. He did not promise pain would make the performance meaningful. He just waited. I put my hand in his until the orchestra finished tuning. Then I walked to the piano. The room rose before I played a note. I could see Graham in the front row. His face broke open when he saw my hands above the keys. Sloane sat beside him, pale and rigid. My father's concerto began with 4 notes he used to whistle while making coffee. I played them with my left hand. The cello answered. My right hand entered 6 measures later. Not with the racing passage my father had written, but with a smaller line I could control. It trembled. It missed the center of 1 key. The orchestra carried me until I found the phrase again. I did not play like the woman I had been before the hammer. I played like the woman who had rebuilt the score because the old version no longer fit her hands. At the cadenza, the room disappeared. There was only ivory beneath my fingers, Caleb breathing with me from the podium, and my father's voice on an old recording. Again from measure 60, Bug, let the phrase breathe. So I did. The last chord faded into silence. Then the audience stood. I remained at the piano until my hands stopped shaking. When I reached the microphone, Graham was crying. 4 years ago, I said. This trust lost Henry and Diane Ellison. 3 weeks later, I lost the use of my hands in an attack that stole evidence from their investigation. Sloane's attorneys leaned toward her. I won't play recordings or ask this room to act as a jury. I can correct the story 2 people here sold about me. I turned toward Graham's portrait. The artist called that painting Survivor. He built a career on the claim that he rescued me. In fact, he possessed my father's stolen archive. He paid the man who attacked me. He married me to monitor what I remembered and to protect the woman whose false alibi he created. Whispers moved through the hall. Graham stood. Mara, stop. The same command he used when my exercises hurt. The same soft authority that once made me grateful. I looked directly at him. You once told me a pianist's hands were her life. Sloane curled her scarred hand beneath the table. You were right, I said. That is why you took mine. The doors at the back of the hall opened. Detective Harris entered with officers from the cold case unit. 20 minutes before the downbeat, she had sent Naomi a 2-word message. Warrant signed. The invitation-only event put both suspects in one controlled place, and the officers had waited in the service corridor so neither could warn the other. But for once, Graham and Sloane did not get to choose the picture the room saw. An officer approached Sloane first. She rose too quickly and struck the table. Graham told me he destroyed the file. One of her attorneys closed his eyes. Graham stared at her. Don't say another word. She turned on him. You said marrying her would fix it. Sloane. You said she would never play again. The room heard that sentence clearly. So did every reporter standing along the back wall. Harris placed Sloane under arrest for the murders of Henry and Diane Ellison. Another officer arrested Graham for conspiracy, evidence tampering, and his role in the attack on me. As they led him past the piano, he looked at my hands. I did love you, he whispered. I closed the fallboard over the keys. Then love was the ugliest thing you ever painted. The criminal cases did not end that night. After the gala came motions, hearings, continuances, and mornings when Naomi called before breakfast because a newspaper had printed something cruel. Sloane's lawyers attacked the controlled call. Graham tried to suppress the evidence from his studio. Wade Danner changed details twice before his plea agreement was signed. The original devices and forensic copies mattered. So did the print from my apartment, the payments, the fabricated rehearsal file, and backups recovered under warrant from Graham's business server. Each piece was challenged. Each had to stand without the gala applause behind it. 14 months later, Sloane pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder rather than face trial. Graham pleaded guilty to conspiracy, evidence tampering, and arranging the burglary that ended my career as I had known it. Both received long prison sentences. Danner received additional time for the assault. The Ellison Arts Trust recovered part of the stolen money through civil settlements and sold Graham's donated work after the court cleared the title. The board offered me the presidency. I declined. I had spent too much of my life inside buildings named for my family. Graham sent one letter through his lawyer before our divorce became final. It was 6 pages of memory and remorse. He wrote about feeding me ice chips after surgery. He wrote that Sloane had been an obsession, but I had become home. He asked whether the years he cared for me counted for anything. I did not answer. Care used to erase harm in my mind. Gratitude used to make every locked door look like shelter. Caleb and I did not fall into a perfect romance after the gala. For 3 months, we argued about my tempo and pretended coffee after rehearsal was not a date. Our first kiss happened beside a loading dock, while a percussionist rolled timpani between us. Caleb laughed into my hair. Very cinematic, he said. Don't ruin it. Too late. The following spring, Harbor Chamber performed my father's concerto again, this time at a small hall in Queens with terrible backstage plumbing and no reporters. My hands still hurt. Some nights, they always would. Before I walked on stage, I found a foam metronome on my chair. Caleb had written, "Good velocity" across it in black marker. I threw it at him. He caught it, bowed, and lifted his baton. I sat at the piano and placed both scarred hands on the opening chord. 4 notes rose into the room. This time, they belonged only to me.